The wind of the desert was ancient, even before the first stone of the pyramid touched the sand. It whispered across the golden dunes, carrying secrets older than kings. Carrying secrets older than kings, older than gods, perhaps older than the Nile itself. And in that whisper, the dream of eternity was born. Pharaoh Khufu, lord of Upper and Lower Egypt, ruler of men and chosen of the sun, once stood at dawn beside the river, watching the golden disk rise from the horizon like a god reborn. In that moment, he saw what no mortal had seen before. The shape of immortality in the geometry of the sun's first light. He saw a mountain not made by nature, but by the hands of men, a mountain that would defy time itself. He dreamed that night of Ra, the sun god, descending from the heavens wrapped in flame and light, and speaking to him through a voice that was both thunder and whisper. "Build," said the god. "Build that which never dies, that which defies the desert's hunger. For your soul shall travel beyond the stars. But your name must remain on earth." Khufu awoke trembling, drenched in sweat, his heart echoing with divine command. He looked through the open window of his chamber, across the sleeping city of Memphis, and saw the stars reflected in the Nile like shattered jewels. He knew what he must do. He would build a stairway to the heavens, a tomb not for death, but for resurrection. The court scribes wrote down the dream, and the priests of Heliopolis gathered in secret to interpret it. They spoke of the Benben stone, the sacred pyramid. Shaped stone that marked the place where the first light of creation had touched the world. They said the pharaoh's dream was no dream, but a vision granted by Ra himself. And so, in the royal workshops, plans began to form. Architects traced lines in sand, priests prayed, and thousands of workers were summoned from across the land. The Nile would bear their stones, the desert would bear their sweat. As the first block was laid upon the sand, the high priest raised his arms to the sky and chanted the hymn of the sun. "May Ra shine upon this stone forever," he said. The workers cheered, but deep in their eyes burned something more than obedience, it was awe. None among them understood why they labored. Only that they were part of something vast, something that would outlive their children's children. The sound of copper chisels striking limestone filled the air. A song of labor and destiny. The desert became a living thing. Camps rose from the dunes, fires burned through the night, and songs echoed over the sands. Men pulled massive stones over wooden sledges greased with oil, their muscles straining, their voices rising in rhythm. Overseers shouted commands, and scribes counted every stone by torchlight. But amidst the noise and dust, something spiritual stirred. The pyramid was not just a monument to a man, it was a bridge between heaven and earth, a mirror of the cosmos itself. At night, the pharaoh would stand upon the half-built plateau, watching the workers by torchlight, their shadows long and strange against the growing walls. He would whisper to himself, "When I am gone, let this stand. Let this speak." The desert wind answered with a sigh, as if promising to remember. In the temples, the priests whispered among themselves, "The gods demand much from those who seek eternity." But the pharaoh only smiled. To him, the gods had already spoken, and he would answer with stone. The Great Pyramid did not rise in silence. It rose with the sound of human breath, of shouted orders, of the rhythmic chant of thousands pulling stone against stone. To outsiders, it seemed a miracle, a mountain growing from the desert, layer by layer, but to those who built it, it was sweat, blood, and the burning sun. From the quarries of Tura and Aswan came white limestone and red granite, their brilliance meant to catch the sunlight like fire. Every dawn, the river glimmered with barges heavy with stone, guided by men whose hands were blistered but whose hearts carried something they could not name. Pride, perhaps, or fear of the gods, or the quiet hope that their work would give meaning to their fleeting lives. They came from every corner of the kingdom, farmers, masons, fishermen, slaves, and free men alike. The flood of the Nile had ended, their fields lay beneath calm water, and now the pharaoh called them to serve. "To build for the gods is to build for eternity," said the overseers. The workers nodded, but in the secret hours before dawn, they whispered to each other of home, of wives waiting beside the river, of children whose laughter was softer than the desert wind. They told each other stories to keep from forgetting their names. The desert, unforgiving yet eternal, watched them without pity. Day by day, the sun bleached their skin, the wind burned their eyes, and still they worked. They built ramps that snaked around the rising structure, dragging stones that weighed as much as a small herd of oxen. Copper tools dulled and bent, ropes frayed and snapped. But they continued, singing the old work songs, their voices echoing against the limestone cliffs. Lift the stone, lift the sun, they sang a prayer, a rhythm, a rebellion against despair. Some said the gods themselves walked among them. That when the workers collapsed in exhaustion, a cool breeze would pass over them, or a shadow would fall across their faces though no cloud moved in the sky. They believed it was the Pharaoh's Ka, his divine spirit, watching over them, guiding their hands. Others said it was the curse of the desert, binding them to this endless labor. Yet even those who cursed their fate knew, deep inside, that what they built was unlike anything the world had ever seen. The overseers were men of stone as well, hard, precise, merciless. Their whips cracked through the air not from cruelty, but from duty. Each block had to fit perfectly, each level had to align with the stars. The pyramid was no simple tomb, it was the map of heaven itself, the earth's mirror of the constellations. The priests of Heliopolis had studied the sky for years, charting where Orion rose and where the North Star stood unshaken. This, they said, is the way of the soul's journey. What is above must be reflected below. The workers didn't understand the language of the priests, but they could feel its power when night fell and the pyramid glowed faintly under starlight. As the structure rose, so too did stories. One man, named Merirah, was said to have carried a stone alone when all others failed, guided by a dream of the pharaoh. Another, a woman who brought water to the laboris each day, was believed to be blessed by Isis herself, her jars never emptied, no matter how many drank. The line between myth and memory blurred. The pyramid did not just shape the land, it shaped the souls of those who touched it. In the evenings, when the desert cooled and the stars burned bright, the workers would lie on their backs and watch the heavens. They spoke in low voices about the gods, about Anubis, who weighed the hearts of men, about Osiris, who ruled the afterlife, about the pharaoh, who would one day become a star among them. When we die, one said, perhaps we too will rise. The others laughed, but not cruelly. It was a laugh of men who knew they were building something larger than any dream. Sometimes, the pharaoh himself would appear at the site, not carried by slaves, but walking alone, his robes catching the light of torches. The workers would freeze, bowing low, but he would only look at the rising pyramid in silence. Will it last? He once asked the high priest beside him. The priest bowed deeply. As long as the sun rises, my lord. Khufu smiled faintly. Then we must build higher. Years passed. Entire generations aged in the shadow of that growing monument. Children born at the beginning of the work became men before it was finished. And when at last the apex stone was placed, a single gleaming block of white limestone, the people gathered below in silence. The sun struck its face, and for a moment the entire pyramid shone like a second sun. Men wept openly. The priests chanted. The pharaoh raised his hands to the heavens. Ra, he said, I have built your stairway. May my soul climb it forever. But the desert does not give without taking. Many who labored would never see home again. Their bones slept beneath the sand, their names forgotten. Yet every block they placed was a word in the pharaoh's eternal prayer. The Great Pyramid was not built by slaves alone, it was built by faith, by exhaustion, by the endless longing of humankind to touch the divine. And when the wind swept over the plateau that night, carrying the scent of limestone and sweat, it whispered through the stones a single truth: mortals die. But what they build in reverence does not. When the last stone was laid and the ramps were taken down, the Great Pyramid stood against the horizon like a frozen sunrise, vast, perfect, and silent. Its sides gleamed in the light of Ra, polished limestone reflecting the sun so fiercely that travelers from distant lands believed it was made of pure gold. Beneath that blinding beauty, deep in its heart, the pharaoh's eternal chamber awaited, a place no mortal was meant to see again once sealed. Inside, the air was cool and still. The priests of Anubis worked by flickering torchlight, their shadows long upon the carved walls. They moved in ritual silence, preparing for the ceremony that would turn a man into a god. The sarcophagus, carved from red granite brought all the way from Aswan, stood in the center, a vessel for eternity. Around it were placed treasures for the next world: golden chariots, alabaster jars, weapons inlaid with lapis and turquoise, miniature boats to carry the pharaoh across the sky, and scrolls of papyrus inscribed with the sacred book of the dead. Each item had purpose, each symbol meaning. The priest spoke in low, rhythmic tones. "May your soul, O Pharaoh, become one with Ra. May your heart be lighter than the feather of Marat. May you pass through the gates of the west unharmed." Their chants echoed softly through the chamber, merging with the hum of the torches, a sound that felt older than language itself. Outside, the people gathered at the base of the pyramid. They wore linen robes, their hair oiled and their eyes rimmed with kohl, shining like obsidian under the sun. The mourning began, not loud, but solemn. Women beat their chests in grief, men bowed their heads in reverence. Yet even in sorrow, there was awe. They were witnessing not the death of a man, but his transformation into something divine. At the appointed hour, as the horizon burned with sunset, the royal procession began. The priests carried the pharaoh's body wrapped in linen, covered in gold amulets, crowned with the uraeus serpent, down the hidden passageways that led deep into the pyramid. The air grew colder the further they descended. The torches flickered as if the walls themselves breathed. The chanting grew louder, echoing through the stone like a heartbeat. "He who becomes a star, he who rises again." In the final chamber, the high priest lifted the crook and flail, symbols of rulership, and laid them upon the pharaoh's chest. He whispered the opening of the mouth ritual, touching a sacred tool to the lips of the golden mask. "So that he may eat, so that he may speak, so that he may live forever." One by one, the priests extinguished their torches, leaving only the light of one sacred lamp, the flame of eternity. The heavy granite lid slid into place with a deep, thunderous finality. Dust fell like sand through an hourglass. The lamp went out. Above, the workers sealed the entrance with slabs of limestone, fitting them so perfectly that the seams vanished into the stone itself. They filled the passage with rubble and sand, hiding the doorway from all eyes. To find it again would be to defy the will of the gods. The pyramid was complete not just as a tomb, but as a map of creation. Every passage, every chamber, was aligned with the stars. The shafts that pierced the walls were not for air, they pointed directly toward the constellation of Orion, the realm of Osiris, the god of rebirth. Through them, the pharaoh's soul would ascend to the heavens. Night fell upon Giza. The stars above burned bright and eternal, mirrored faintly in the angles of the pyramid below. The priests climbed to the plateau and gazed upon their work in silence. "He will rise," said one. "He already has," answered another. Years passed, then centuries. The desert reclaimed its peace. Sand crept against the pyramid's base, storms smoothed its edges, and the golden casing stones that once gleamed like fire were stolen or worn away. But still, the shape remained unbroken, unyielding. Travelers from far lands stood in awe, unable to imagine how such a monument had been built. Some said giants had raised it. Others whispered it was made by magic, or that the gods themselves had shaped it before time began. Yet the truth, like the desert, was patient. Beneath the layers of myth and dust lay the story of men and women who had given their lives for something greater than themselves. Their names might be forgotten, but their work endured. Every stone bore their silent prayer, "We were here." Deep inside, where no sunlight had touched for millennia, the pharaoh still slept, or perhaps watched, his spirit drifting among the stars. The walls around him held the hymns of eternity, carved in hieroglyphs that spoke of rebirth, of judgment, of the endless cycle of day and night. The gods, too, were silent now, but the pyramid stood as their echo. Sometimes, when the desert wind passes through the narrow cracks of its chambers, it makes a sound low, haunting, almost human. The Bedouins say it is the pharaoh's breath, whispering from beyond, remembering his people. Others say it is the voice of the workers, still calling to one another through time. Whatever it is, it reminds all who listen that eternity was not a promise, it was a choice carved, block by block, into the bones of the earth. And so, under the endless stars, the Great Pyramid stood not just as a monument to death, but as the oldest dream of humankind, the dream that we might outlast our brief, fragile lives by creating something that endures forever. The centuries drifted across Egypt like grains of sand through a great unseen hourglass. Kingdoms rose and fell, empires came and went, and yet the pyramids endured unmoving, unbroken, like the bones of the gods themselves. The Nile changed its course, temples crumbled into ruin, and the language that once filled the valley with hymns faded into whispers no one could read. But the pyramids remained. They stood in silence, guardians of time, staring into the endless horizon as though waiting for someone or something to remember. When the Greeks came, they gazed upon the pyramids and thought them older than the world. Herodotus, the great historian, asked the priests how such things could be built, and they told him stories of 100,000 men working for 20 years. But even he could not decide if it was truth or legend. The Romans, centuries later, stood before them in awe and tried to measure their perfection, their geometry too divine for human minds. They built their own monuments, arches, arenas, and domes, yet none carried the same stillness, the same whisper of eternity. The desert swallowed the cities of the pharaohs, but not the pyramids. Sandstorms buried villages and uncovered them again, caravans passed, wars raged, and yet the pyramids stood silent witnesses to everything. Even the great library of Alexandria burned, taking with it the memory of ancient Egypt's secrets, but the pyramids refused to yield theirs. They did not burn, they did not break. They simply watched. In the Middle Ages, travelers from far-off lands, Persians, Arabs, and Europeans, came seeking treasure or truth. Some climbed the vast slopes, carving their names into stone. Others broke into the sealed passages, lighting torches in the corridors where no fire had burned for 3,000 years. They found the sarcophagi empty, the treasures long stolen, the mummies gone. But they did not understand that the treasure was never gold. It was endurance, the proof that humanity, at its most fragile, could also be immortal. For the Bedouins who camped nearby, the pyramids were living things. They called them the tombs of the giants. On moonless nights, they swore they saw pale lights drifting across their faces, like the souls of ancient kings still guarding their sleep. When the wind howled through the desert, they said it was the voice of the pharaohs, not angry, but patient, reminding the world of what was once divine. Then came the modern age. Explorers with notebooks and instruments replaced priests and dreamers. In 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte stood before the Great Pyramid at Giza, his soldiers in or behind him. "Soldiers," he declared, "from the top of these pyramids, 40 centuries look down upon you." He was right, 40 centuries and more. Men of science measured, mapped, and studied the pyramids, trying to unravel their secrets. Yet for every answer, 100 new questions emerged. How were they built so precisely? Why were they aligned with the stars? What secrets lay within their silent stones? In the 19th and 20th centuries, the world rediscovered Egypt. Archaeologists brushed away the sand, scholars learned to read hieroglyphs, and once again the voices of the ancients spoke. They told of faith and mathematics, of kings who ruled not with arrogance but with cosmic duty. The pyramids, they learned, were not only tombs, they were symbols of balance, order, and the eternal link between heaven and earth. Each was a frozen prayer, carved in geometry. And yet, no matter how much was discovered, mystery always remained. The pyramid's angles pointed perfectly to the cardinal directions, its base was almost flawless in symmetry. Even with all modern tools, no one could replicate it without immense effort. It was as if the builders had worked not only with their hands, but with knowledge passed from the gods themselves. Today, the pyramids still stand beneath the same burning sun. Tourists come by the thousands, snapping photographs, riding camels, touching the stones that once echoed with the voices of labourers and priests. Children run laughing through the sand. But when the crowds fade and night returns, the desert reclaims its ancient stillness. The stars above glitter just as they did in Khufu's time, and their reflections still touch the pyramid's sides, faint but eternal. If you stand there long enough, when the noise of the world falls away, you might hear it, the low hum of history, the heartbeat of time itself. You might feel the air shift, heavy with memory, and sense that unseen eyes are still watching. Not with menace, but with the calm of something that has seen ages come and go and remains untouched. The pyramids were not built for children's tales, nor for easy wonder. They were built for the gods, and for the fragile dream that humans might stand beside them. They are proof that death is not an end but a transformation, That memory can be carved into stone and outlast the flesh that dreamed it. The pharaoh's dream still lingers there in the sand, in the starlight, in the perfect angles that defy time. The builder's sweat, the priest's prayers, the people's hope, all of it remains, sealed into every block. For 5,000 years, the wind has whispered their names, though none can speak them now. And so, as night blankets the desert and the stars rise over Giza, the pyramids gleam faintly under the moon, not as relics, but as living echoes of eternity. They do not need to speak. Their silence says it all. We are time itself.